Greetings everyone. Welcome to today's lecture on colonialism, reformism and women's education. Those who were able to record their experiences in the social reform and freedom movements belong to the educated elite. We hear little about or from women of other social classes or backgrounds. So, to read a history of women from a woman's point of view is to read between the lines. The sheer mass of detail that several authors like Geraldine Forbes have provided on the social reform movement, colonialism, women's education, work, political participation and social activism locates them centrally in the history of nationalist struggle and other movements for social change. Women gradually articulated their needs differently from men. They started criticizing society, started demanding representation in their own right, and developed their own consciousness as well as organizations and institutions. While they understood their subordinate position, and during the first phase of the women's movement, they did not seek emancipation from patriarchy. However, that did not mean that they were satisfied with the status quo. So they kept on raising questions and they kept on rejecting the claims of others on their mind, body and soul. Now let us look at what was the response of reformists as well as nationalists to the issue of female education in the course of 19th and 20th century. On the one hand, there were social reformers like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Jyotirao Phule, Pandita Ramabai and many more who supported women's education and went against the traditional society to provide education to girls. But on the other hand, there were national figures like Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Vishnu Shastri Chiplankar who voiced the opposition of the society to female education as well as to various reforms that were being discussed in name of bringing justice to women. So while Tilak asserted that education will be a hindrance for women in performing their duties as a housewife, as a mother, as a daughter, and he was of the opinion that English education will denationalize Indian women. So with this kind of thought process, he opposed the establishment of the first girls' high school in Pune in 1884, started by M.G. Ranade, stating that the curriculum for girls should be different from that of boys. It should consist of knowledge about vernaculars, needlework, sanitation, instead of subjects like English, mathematics and sciences, as this kind of education was fit to be given only to boys. He stressed on giving rather moral and religious instruction through education, and all these including household skills were to be taught by native women and not the missionary women. He frequently also cited the case of Rakhma Bai, who had fought a legal battle against her husband, to whom she had been married in childhood, and when her husband sought restitution of conjugal rights, she simply refused to and even took her husband to court. The fact that the bride was educated and could articulate her thoughts to gain public support and finally even win the case became an instrument for a certain section of reformers and nationalists to elicit anger for English education of women from the conservative society. So, while Tilak was against English education for girls, it is evident from the following statement also, that is, teaching women to read English would ruin their precious traditional virtues and would make them immoral and insubordinate. So, with these views, the public opinion was also kind of conveyed through his various writings and speeches. Then one can also talk about home rule and national education. During the home rule, Tilak proposed the scheme of national education, which consisted of moral and religious education, the theory of karma, existence of God, while discarding the English language and related subjects. For women, this scheme of education provided training of some technical skills and taught Dharam Shastras, since he believed that education for women should be home centered and also should be covering aspects of morality, idealism, dutifulness towards the family members as well as the home. So, Tilak repeatedly articulated through Maharatha that if given education, women will become independent and not abide by the rules of family and society at large. Education should train girls in a way that they ensure a happy family life after marriage, and nothing more or less than that. Now, having discussed that aspect of reformism and nationalism and what was its impact on the kind of change that was coming about, let us talk about Christian missionary schools and how the upper castes of Indian society reacted towards these new kind of curriculum that was being introduced in the missionary schools and the English language that was fairly popular in these schools. So, Geraldine Forbes has given a very detailed account as to how when from 1821 onwards, the Church Missionary Society opened 30 schools for girls in Calcutta, but could not entrust the higher caste pupils because of the religious instruction that was being given in these schools. So, while the upper castes decided to stay away from these missionary schools, the lower castes and Christian families got their children admitted into these schools in a much larger number. So, the Scottish Church Society in Madras Presidency had 6 schools with 200 Hindu girls by 1840. And J.E. Drinkwater Bethune opened the Hindu Balika Vidyalaya in Calcutta in 1849. Although the medium of instruction was Bengali and the school was secular, it failed to attract pupils from upper castes. Of course, due to the hold of caste notions, patriarchal notions, which kind of was a hurdle in the path of female education. Thus, female education was not widely accepted by the upper caste Indian society, while Christians and the lower castes were open to it, and in fact, they were happy that their girls were getting a chance to get into these institutions. Then Kadambini Ganguly, who was born in Bhagalpur, Bihar in 1861, who was the daughter of a Brahmo reformer, and after obtaining a BA degree in 1883, she married Dwarkanath Ganguly. In 1886, she qualified as a medical doctor, one of the first two Indian women doctors who were qualified to practice Western medicine, and the other female was Anandi Gopal Joshi. So gradually we see that female interest in education, especially in medicine and in teaching profession, gradually expanded. So Kadambini went to United Kingdom in 1892 and returned to India after qualifying in LRCP and LRCS as well as GFPS. These were specifically degrees in medicine, and it was definitely a great achievement in those days for a woman to acquire so much knowledge. So then she practiced for a while in Lady Dufferin Hospital and later started her own private practice. While she was practicing, she also held the dual responsibility of raising 8 children as well as a professional practice. In addition, she and her husband were actively involved in female emancipation and other kind of social movements, reformism, in order to bring about a positive change in the lives of women. She was one of the 6 female delegates to the 5th session of Indian National Congress in 1889 and even organized the Women's Conference in Calcutta in 1906 after Bengal partition, and finally died in 1923. Next women about whom one can talk if one is talking about female education during colonial India is Anandi Gopal Joshi. She was born in an orthodox Marathi family in 1865 and she was married at the age of 9. She gave birth at the age of 14 to a boy who died due to lack of medical care. And by the age of 19, with the help and inspiration of her liberal-minded husband Gopal Rao and some American benefactors, she could enroll in the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. She graduated with an MD on March 11, 1886 and was appointed the physician in charge of the female ward of the local hospital in Kolhapur, Maharashtra. So, while Anandibai Joshi was achieving so much, but it was not an easy task for her as she kept on facing reactionary opposition. Women like Anandibai Joshi and Miss Annie Jagannathan took to medical education, fighting all the criticism and harassment by society. Anandibai graduated from Women's Medical College at Philadelphia in 1886 and became the first Indian woman to obtain a degree in Western medicine. She suffered from tuberculosis, which caused her death in 1887. Now, another category of thinkers that one can talk were the supporters of counter perspective schools. The history of women's education in Bengal would be incomplete without mentioning 2 girls' schools of a different perspective. One was the Mahakali Pathshala, which was established in 1893 by Mataji Gangabai, who was a Maharashtrian ascetic and a very well-known cousin of the famous Jhansi Ki Rani. Now, Mataji Gangabai was driven by the desire to impart religious and moral education to girls on strictly orthodox principles with the objective of regenerating Indian society by educating girls in Indian ways of etiquette, morality, thought process, etc. A reaction to the Western based education in existing institutions encouraged conservatism in those days, attracting younger generations also. The school was blessed with a visit from Swami Vivekananda in 1897. Another important example that one can give of such kind of schools was Sister Nivedita Girls' School. This was another counter perspective school which was inaugurated by Sri Sarada Devi in the presence of Swami Vivekananda, Swami Brahmananda and others on November 13th, 1898. It had a large number of young married women who looked forward to attending their classes after finishing their domestic duties. Now, another thinker who played a very important role in championing female education was D.K. Karve. In 1896, D.K. Karve, a social reformer, established a shelter for widows that later expanded in 1907 to become a girls' high school in Pune. The aim was to make unmarried girls as well as widows independent in their thoughts and finances. So, the curriculum of the school was to ensure their professional growth, employability and also ability to earn a livelihood. In 1915, he proposed for the establishment of a women's university in India at the annual session of Social Conference at Bombay. He opened the university in 1916, which provided courses in modern sciences and English. In 1920, the university was shifted to Bombay and was renamed as SNDT, Indian Women's University. A similar curriculum was proposed to ensure intellectual growth as well as employability of the female students. This institution was largely opposed by the moderates, who demanded that the curriculum for women's higher education should deal with religious literature, customs, way of life, scriptures, so that the girls become efficient in their role of a pious homemaker. So, these were the limitations that played a very important role in deciding the future course of action, and how it was within this limited domain that Indian women had to kind of venture out of their homes and had to participate in this initiative that was being taken not only by the colonial state, but also by several reformers and also nationalists who wanted to bring about a change in the lives of Indian women, but at the same time this change could not be revolutionary. This had to come with several checks and balances, and as has been pointed out by Partha Chatterjee, there was a distinct a kind of a trend which was there between what was the public domain and what was the private domain. So, anything that was related to women was considered to be part of part of private domain. Anything pertaining to rules and regulations related to how women should lead their lives, the age of marriage, the age of consummation of marriage, all that was considered to be as the private affairs of the families. So, therefore, the reformers and the nationalists did not like too much interference, neither they supported too much of interference from the colonial state in these matters of family. And hence, they were very skeptical of this new kind of education that was being introduced, the English language and new subjects that were being introduced. So, therefore, they were more in favor of traditional education with the limited goal of making women educated or literate housewives and mothers capable enough to take care of their families. whereas there were reformers and the colonial state who was looking at the problem of backwardness in Indian society from a different point of view, from a different angle. So therefore, they thought that probably by introducing newer subjects, this change would come about, and by making women capable enough, a change would finally come in society. And it was this stream of thinkers who played a very important role in encouraging women like Anandi Bai Joshi and so many other women who took recourse to medical education, who even went abroad, who left their homes and took all the risks, and they even kind of walked out of their marriage, and their only aim was to make a career for themselves. And they did not stop short of that only, because ultimately they came back to India and they got satisfaction in serving the people of India. They were not selfish in the sense that after acquiring that kind of training, after rigorous education, they would settle abroad and kind of venture into greener pastures. So they preferred coming back, they preferred making a change in the lives of their fellow beings. Thank you.